Okay, hello, Jennifer. Tell people about your documentary, Photographic Justice, the Corky Lee story.
Photographic Justice is about Corky Lee, a second generation Chinese American who has taken 50 years of photography of a community that he was part of, but also he was personally involved with, and also he felt like the stories of the community were not getting out to mainstream media. So he dedicated that time to making sure the protests, the celebrations, everything in between, all the daily life was documented. And his goal was really to kind of push it into mainstream media so that, instead of having kind of stereotypical images of Asian Americans, Corky really kind of covered the everyday life.
Yeah, it's very good stuff. It's very humanizing, and he definitely was someone who had utility. Is that why you wanted to make this documentary? What are some of your reasons why you wanted to make this?
Actually, it started off just being a 5-minute vignette. Like I
Oh,
didn't know Corky. I didn't research Corky. I didn't know Corky at all. Like I'd never heard his name. I didn't know even not much about API history, frankly. But I had met him randomly. He was very engaging immediately. You
Mm,
know, that
mm,
kind of person that just knows history, that just interjects like monumental events in everyday conversation is so appealing, right? Like they're just
mm.
you just kind of want to follow him, and he just had so much passion for his community and really just documenting and photographing all of these different events but not getting paid. It kind of makes you wonder what makes him tick. Like
Right.
he didn't necessarily was not getting paid, but he also did not have a way to get it to publication, right? Like he was just doing it, and he was just, unbeknownst to me and everyone else in the community, just doing it to have this incredible archive of history. And he just did it literally by one photograph at a time.
That's very compelling, very passionate stuff, kind of passionate stuff. What kind of man was he? You described some of his attributes. Maybe like cohesively, what was he like as a person?
Corky was very steadfast.
Mm,
His brother John Lee always said that he had this North Star. Corky knew what he was doing, and he just kept showing up. Like he was one of those guys that everyone felt like they knew, but they really
mm,
did not know him, right? You didn't know. Like what really surprised me during the making of the film was that people who'd known him for 40, 50 years didn't really know the man behind the camera. Like they just saw him all the time, and he was so friendly to people, and he was so charming, and he always had, he always remembered people's backgrounds and knew where they were from, or if he just met you he could tell you about where you were from and connect you with other people. He was that guy that was so engaging that people really just never really had time or inclination maybe to ask him about himself. So yeah, I think that's part of the appeal of the film, is kind of it reveals this aspect of a man who everyone knew but didn't really know. And that was so Corky. So he was a very private but public person. He was very famous but not famous,
mm.
right? Like he should be this so well known, but he really is in certain circles. And yet his photos will live beyond, and I think will really kind of tell this larger story of the Asian American community for real generations to come. Like it'll be a long while. I always personally felt like Corky would outlive me, but he will anyway, because this film will live on well beyond us.
Oh yes. Okay, so you said he was elusive, a bit of a mystery man, or sort of everyone's acquaintance to an
I'm not
extent.
entirely sure he was intentionally a mystery man.
Right. Right. Right.
It
Right.
was
Okay.
just because like no one knew, but I don't think it I'm not sure if it was intentional. He was just so there. Like he had everyone else's history in his head, right? Like he could
Mm-hmm.
just throw out the most funny facts. Like he'll be shooting someone in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, and tell me that's where Johnny Appleseed is from. Like it was just that guy that just had these very funny, quirky kind of, facts that somehow he made them germane to every day. And he did that with history, like the larger aspects of history, like the 1882 Exclusion Act. He could talk to you about the 1965 Immigration Act. He could talk to you about the 1988 Civil Liberties Act. He could put them in everyday conversations and explain what they were so that everyone literally was getting an education whenever you spoke to him.
This reminds me of another documentary I saw recently about photojournalist and film director Gordon Parks. And there's how you're describing Corky is very much how they sort of describe Gordon, like sort of always present, but sort of like in the background to an extent. Maybe that's
Yeah.
just what makes a good photojournalist. I don't know. But who are the key people in his life as well? So you can respond to both those statements or
Um,
question and statement.
well, the key people would be, obviously all the people that I interviewed in the film. I think,
Yeah.
they were interviewed for a reason. Like his family was, his mother, his brothers, his sister. They were people that, frankly, people didn't even know he was married. They didn't know his, his family
Okay.
didn't even know anyway, his family, didn't know what was going on in his life. It was just that Corky was so focused on getting and documenting the community and felt so much tremendous pressure that he really kind of didn't really, I don't know, he just really had this separate life. He did have a longtime girlfriend who was like interviewed in the film. He had so many contemporaries who were activists back in the day, but also there were experts and historians that also tell Corky's story. Corky was, if you talk to anyone, everyone thinks that everyone's Corky's best friend, right? That is who he is. That is a
Hmm.
guy who meant so much and had that ability just to draw you in and to make you think, like, wow, it's just this one-on-one that Corky and I are having. But he is like that with everyone. It was a complete talent, and it's why if you go on the internet or if you ask anyone about Corky who knows him,
Hmm.
everyone has these amazing stories because Corky, I don't know, I don't know how he spent so much time with so many people all the time. He was just an incredible person.
So you touched on this, and it's mentioned in the documentary, or it's shown in the documentary, that he had an impact on younger people. So I would like for you to expand on that a little bit. What kind of impact he had?
I think Corky was one of those very, so he's the guy that people, if you heard about, if you took an AAPI studies course, for instance, you might like run across a photograph. His name would come up if you were an Asian American. And I think that what Corky did was he was very um available for younger people. Like
Hmm.
if a professor at a school college had told them like, oh, Corky lives in New York, and the person went to New York, Corky would be there, take all of these people under his wing, let them follow him around. I mean, he was a guy that really loved like being able to talk to the next generations. And frankly, he loved to talk to any generation. He really connected with everyone. You would think that the older generations really kind of understood like their history and understood the culture and why it was important. But really, I think Corky helped everyone kind of see why that all matters in his
Hmm.
photography, which
Very
is
cool.
such an important message. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How long did you work on this documentary for?
I worked on it for close to 20 years, 19 years from beginning to end. That
What?
doesn't include up to now. This has been 21 years. But
No.
yeah,
How is
yeah.
that possible?
Well, I think it's possible when you didn't know you were going to do a documentary, right? Like I was still kind of for the first 10 years, I was kind of stuck on this five minute vignette, but then you realize like you've got a lot of footage, you're not going to fit it into 5 minutes. And he was ever interesting to me, so I could never stop the camera. So I didn't also want to commit. There's a big commitment, following somebody like Corky
Hmm.
and doing a documentary because he is so beloved, and you want to make sure you get the story right, not just his story, but the community story. So it took over 10 years for me to say that I would actually do the documentary. But I helped that I had this brilliant editor named Linda Hattendorf who really understood the story and understood what I was doing. And so she came on board. And that's why Corky's story, the movie, is so well told. She really kind of unfolds it in this beautiful way. You really get to know Corky. And I think that all of these little things, these little nuggets that she's strewn kind of throughout the film. It's why people go back and see the film, not just once, twice, three times, like
Hmm.
multiple times, because every time you see it, you pull from it something different. And I think for me, one thing I've learned, like at least for me, what I consider a good film is when people are like, hey, I like the new version. And it's the same version that they've seen, right? Like they're convinced that whatever they learned just now is not in the other version that they'd seen. So I think that that's the brilliance of, her editing and
Yep.
her storytelling as a gift.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, thanks for your time. My final question for you is, what are your plans for the future?
My plans, my big plans. So I have another documentary, but forget
Nice.
about that. My big plans are to become
Ooh.
a harmonica player, go on bands and maybe learn the banjo.
Okay.
We'll go on this whole music road. No, I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm kind of not kidding, but that will happen eventually. But I do have other stories to tell, so those will continue.
So more content is coming.
More content is coming, and it's another one I've been working on since 2009.
That
Nothing
is
I,
outrageous. What is
I
this?
know. I'm not a overnight kind of storyteller, that's for sure.
Really not. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time as well. Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure.